Hi, my name is Justin Haskins, and this video is going to blow your mind. I promise that a lot, but this one is definitely going to deliver on that promise. We're talking about an essential part of the Our Common Agenda proposal, framework, package, whatever you want to call it, that's being offered by the United Nations. It's one of the most far-reaching authoritarian frameworks that have ever been offered. It really is that crazy. And the part of it that we're going to be talking about today, this is because this video is part of a series of videos. We've been talking about all kinds of different aspects of the Our Common Agenda movement proposal. But this one in particular is really infuriating. It's really going to blow your mind, and not in a good way. It's called the Global Digital Compact. And that sounds a little, sounds maybe a little boring, a little dry. It's not. It's not. Now, before I get into the details of the Global Digital Compact and the effect that it's going to have on free speech, which, by the way, is going to be a big impact on free speech, you might want to start thinking about alternative ways to communicate with your friends if this thing actually goes through. Because if you were planning on just continuing to use the internet to say whatever it is that you think, well, this proposal might make that impossible. So before we get into that, please, I want to take a couple seconds just to ask you to subscribe to the channel. Please subscribe to the channel. It's brand new. I've been involved with YouTube and television and radio and all kinds of stuff for a long time, but I've never had my own YouTube channel. And so I got to ask you to please subscribe to the channel. Please share this video if you find it interesting. Leave a comment if you have an opinion. All of that stuff's going to help break through that big tech algorithm that's always trying to keep conservative, pro-liberty content out of people's screens and away from their television sets and their phones. This is the only way we're going to break through that, is if people subscribe to the channel and share the content and like the video and do all of that stuff. It doesn't cost you anything at all. It just takes a few moments to do it. And it's really going to help build this channel and build the community that I'm trying to create here on YouTube and through podcast networks and things like that. The main goal of this channel is to provide you with information and stories and ideas that other people just aren't talking about, just really interesting topics and ideas. We're gonna do a whole lot of stuff on globalism, on the Great Reset, on futurism and artificial intelligence, and the Biden administration and the future of liberty and freedom, and even some stuff on Christianity and faith and all kinds of really interesting things. But people aren't going to see it unless you subscribe to the channel and you like the video and you do those kinds of things. It really does help with the algorithm. So please take a moment to do that if you could. I would really, really appreciate it. All right, let's talk about the Global Digital Compact. This thing is absolutely nuts, as I said before. I'm going to start by showing you, there's a really detailed report that the United Nations put out, and I think we might get to that. But what I want to start with is the Our Common Agenda larger report that deals with all kinds of different topics, including this Global Digital Compact, because it does a nice job of summarizing this insane idea. And I think it does it in a way that makes it a little bit easier to digest than the more detailed proposal that is really, really interesting, but is long and kind of dry. So I want to give you kind of an overarching idea of what's going on here. So this comes from, I think we're on page, looks like 64, at least on the PDF of the Our Common Agenda report. And in it, it's talking about the need for online spaces to be governed as part of this Our Common Agenda package. So here's what it says. It's item 93 here. It is time to protect the online space and strengthen its governance. That, even if we could just stop there, should worry you at least a little bit. I would urge the Internet Governance Forum to adapt, innovate, and reform to support effective governance of the digital commons and keep pace with rapid real-world developments. Furthermore, building on the recommendations of the Roadmap for Digital Cooperation, which is a separate report, the United Nations governments, the private sector, and civil society could come together as a multi-stakeholder digital technology track in preparation for a summit of the future to agree on a global digital compact. Okay, there's a lot of stuff there. Let's kind of digest this sentence here, because it's really important that we get this right. Building on the recommendations of this roadmap for digital cooperation, the United Nations, governments, the private sector, and civil society. So these are basically elites, right? And the public-private partnership stuff is really, really important. This is the Great Reset. This is what this is all about. Government working hand in hand with private corporations, like big tech companies, okay? That's kind of what they have in mind in this particular thing, I think. Could come together as a multi-stakeholder, that's always a key word for the Great Reset, digital technology track in preparation for a summit of the future. Summit of the Future is going to happen in September 2024. It's a meeting, an official meeting of the United Nations. Heads of state are going to be there. And at this meeting, they're going to approve our common agenda, or some version of our common agenda, as part of a pact for the future. That's what they're calling it already. That's September 2024. So not this upcoming September, but the following one. And it says here that in preparation for the Summit of the Future to agree on a global digital compact. So they want global rules for digital content. This would outline shared principles for an open, free, that's hilarious, as you'll find out. There's nothing free about this, and secure digital future for all. All right. So then it talks about how the issues that they want to address as part of this global digital compact is reaffirming the fundamental commitment to connecting the unconnected. So they want internet for everybody. That would involve massive government spending programs and things like that, but they want to provide internet access to everyone. There's nothing diabolical about that, but it's a very expensive part of this proposal. Avoiding fragmentation of the internet, providing people with options, as to how their data is used. Now, that's a good thing if the data protections are for individuals from big companies, but that this goes beyond that. It also means that there's going to be greater government involvement in the management of data and the collection of data and use of data. And I hope I will be able to show you some of that. I hope we have time to fit that in. This video is not going to be super long, so we may not have time for it. But if I can, I'm going to show you those parts of the proposal that talk about data, because that's what they mean. They don't mean real privacy protections. They just mean privacy protections from private companies, which is a good thing, but they're still going to have your data. Someone's going to have your data. It's not like no one will have your data. Government is going to be collecting your data. And that's obviously a problem that's fraught with all kinds of pitfalls and issues that could arise as a result of that. All right, going on. It says application of human rights online. This is also a very loaded term, because what does it mean to say application of human rights online? Well, what that that could easily be extended into, well, you're not allowed to say this or that because that's offensive to XYZ community, and therefore you shouldn't be allowed to say it because they have human rights to not have to hear you talk about that thing. So they're not really talking about human rights in a classical liberal sense where we're talking about individual freedom. They're talking about human rights in a different way that involves pitting some rights against other rights. And I think that that's because they've created all of these rights that aren't really individual rights, like the right to not be offended by content that's online. Like, that's not a right, but that's the kind of stuff that they have. That's how they've interpreted all of these things. That's how they've defined it, rather, I think, is the better way of saying it. So the application of human rights online and promoting a trustworthy internet. That's important. Promoting a trustworthy internet by introducing accountability criteria for discrimination and misleading content. Now that's a big one. That's a big one. That is really, really important. What the Global Digital Compact, when you start digging into the details of it, what you find is that one of the key goals is to create universal rules for social media companies, for other big tech firms, and for the development of technology generally, that creates accountability. That means, rules and regulations and potentially punishments and fines and whatever for discrimination and misleading content. So if you say something online, or you do something, well, really, I guess if you say it in any sort of capacity online, communicate it online, or have products or services that are online that are deemed to be discriminatory, which could be something as simple as a church saying, here's what we believe about gay marriage, or I was referring to a Christian church, but it could be a Muslim church. It could be other religions that hold to that view. It could be it could be that you criticize Barack Obama. You can't tell you how many times back when Barack Obama was president, I wrote articles about the economy, or I'm not saying anything even remotely close to anything related to Barack Obama's race or anything like that. I am not in any way racist against Barack Obama, okay? Barack Obama could be the whitest guy in the world, like, I don't know, Joe Biden, and I still would have a huge problem with the things that he did from a policy perspective. And that's how I always wrote. I never, ever, ever talked about his race or anything like that. But I would get massive amounts of messages from people saying, you're a racist. The only reason you don't like him is because you're a racist. You're a white guy and he's black and you can't criticize him. That's racism. Well, could that be defined as discrimination? Some people would say yes. Some people would say white men should not be allowed to talk about black women or whatever because of underlying systemic racism and discrimination and everything else. It also mentions misleading content here. That's even worse than the discrimination piece, because misleading content can be defined as anything. I think almost everything that spews or spittles out of Joe Biden's mouth is misleading content. So if I was in charge of this and I believed in banning misleading content, I wouldn't allow anything Joe Biden says on the internet. I don't believe that that's the way we should treat people. I'm okay with, I think debate and free speech is so important. It's the fundamental, it literally is one of the foundations of a free society. If you can't talk to each other and disagree with each other and debate with each other openly, you don't really have a free society. And that's clearly not what the United Nations wants, because they want accountability criteria that make sure that globally people aren't allowed to talk about certain things or disagree with certain people or disagree with certain institutions. This is hugely problematic. And it's crazy that they're actually calling for this. More broadly, it says, the compact could also promote regulation of artificial intelligence to ensure that this is aligned with shared global values. Now, there's so much to unpack on artificial intelligence. We're going to have to do a video just on that one topic and not even really on our common agenda necessarily. There is no doubt that artificial intelligence is a significant problem, and we do need to make sure that global values are embedded in artificial intelligence. We can't just, I don't think it's a good idea to just let artificial intelligence run loose, run wild, do whatever it determines it wants. And in time, artificial intelligence is going to reach the level very soon where it has the ability to start learning to the point where it can make decisions and come up with ethical standards on its own. And there's a lot of problems with artificial intelligence. It is very important technology that will change the world for the better, but it might, in some respects, but it might make the world a lot scarier and a lot more terrifying in other ways. And so there do need to be shared global values embedded in artificial intelligence. But the question is, which values? Whose values? The kind of values that say that you can't disagree with the United Nations online because that's misleading content? The same kind of values that were used by social media companies to silence people throughout the COVID-19 era for disagreeing with them, for disagreeing with elites in the Biden administration and others on you know, the World Health Organization and, and other international institutions on the way they were handling lockdowns or the effectiveness of various medications and whatnot. I mean, I don't want to get into all of that, but I think you see the point. Like, what are we embedding artificial intelligence? Which values are we embedding into artificial intelligence? My values? Not my values. The United Nations values, which includes discriminating against people on the basis of their religious beliefs and things like that, by saying we're not going to allow you to say certain things because that's discriminatory, or we're not going to allow you to talk about things that go against the standard talking points of the United Nations because that's misleading content. Well, that's not the values I want in an artificial intelligence. That's not what I want. Okay. So really important stuff. All right. Really, really important stuff. So let's switch over to a different document. Let's I wasn't sure we were going to get to this, but I want to dive into this just a little bit. This is a something that they're calling a policy brief for a global digital compact. And this policy brief is titled The Global Digital Compact and an Open, Free, and Secure Digital Future for All. It was published in May 2023, so very recently. And this goes into details about the Global Digital Compact. Again, I wish we had time to dive into all of this, but it gets really convoluted at times, and it's pretty long. It's 32 pages long, so we can't go through all of it, but I do want to hit some of the highlights for you so that you can get a sense of what we're talking about. All right. It says here, the challenges that we face can be addressed only through stronger international cooperation. That means the elites getting together, the governments getting together and making decisions for you. The Summit of the Future in 2024 is an opportunity to agree on multilateral solutions. Multilateral just means multiple different organizations and institutions and layers of institutions and things like that for a better tomorrow, strengthening global governance for both present and future generations. I don't want to strengthen global governance for present or future generations. I don't like global governance. Okay. So then he talks about the digital world. He talks about the urgent need for reworking how we deal with technology from a UN level and multilateralism level and all of that. So I'm just going to pick some of the pieces of this report so you can get a sense of the kinds of things that are going through their minds, right? So one of it is data divides are also growing. As data are collected and used in digital applications, they generate huge commercial and social value. While monthly global data traffic is forecast to grow by more than 400% by 2026, activity is concentrated among a few global players. Many developing countries are at risk of becoming more providers of raw data while having to pay for the services that their data help to produce. And then it says, it highlights many of the things that are sort of the innovations that are coming our way and the divides that might exist as a result of that. And then it talks about inequality that could result from having these different technological divides and everything. And then it says behind these divides is a massive governance gap, meaning we need more regulations of technology from a UN level and other, multilateralism type level. So we're talking international agreements. New technologies are lacking even basic guardrails. So we need to put in those guardrails. Now, to some degree, I actually kind of agree with that. I mentioned that with artificial intelligence, but who are putting in the guardrails and what are the guardrails? Those are the key questions. I don't agree with what the United Nations would want to do. It is harder to bring a soft toy than an AI chatbot to market today. Because such digital technologies are privately developed, governments are constantly lagging behind in regulating them in the public interest. As a result of decades of underinvestment in state capacities, public institutions in most countries are ill-equipped to assess and respond to digital challenges. Okay, well, I don't totally agree with the way it said that there, but all right. Very few can compete with private actors to harness talent and offer incentives to digitally skilled people to work in the public sector. Right. The public sector sucks. I don't want the public sector stealing all of the most talented people and then just collectively developing new technologies. I don't want the government developing AI. I don't want that either, because I don't trust the government. And most people don't trust the government to develop a technology like that. That's not what we want, at least not in America. Public administrations are being hollowed out at the time that they are most needed to support safe and equitable digital transformations. Hollowed out? No, they're not. They're spending more money than ever. They're not being hollowed out. As was observed during the coronavirus disease pandemic, the use of digital technologies has brought unparalleled opportunities for how we live, learn, work, and communicate. That's true. It has also brought great harm through irresponsible and malicious use and criminal abuses, as well as negative unintended consequences and environmental impacts. With states vying for political and military advantage through technological dominance, the risks of destabilizing competition, escalation, and accidents mount. Even as society grapple with these threats, newer technologies are raising fundamental questions concerning the features that make humans unique. That's an incredible statement. It's talking about artificial intelligence. It's talking about the emergence of technologies that unite man and machine together in some fashion. And a lot of these issues that it says here are true. I mean, these are problems. But should the United Nations be the one providing the so-called solutions? And so it says, we urgently need to find ways to harness digital technologies for the benefit of all. We need national and international governance arrangements that prevent their misuse. We must shape innovation in ways that reflect universal human values and protect the planet. Unilateral, regional, national, or industry actions are insufficient. So it's not enough to say that we have regional, national, or industry actions. So America can't do this on its own. It needs the internationalism of the United Nations in order to do this, the strong guiding hand of the United Nations. This cooperation must be global and multi-stakeholder to prevent digital inequalities becoming irreversible global chasms. Okay, chasms, whatever. I propose the development of a global digital compact that would set out principles, objectives, and actions to advance an open, free, secure, and human-centered digital future, one that is anchored in universal human rights and that enables the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. Well, this is the point. The Sustainable Development Goals are not universal human rights. There are universal human rights within the SDGs, but much of the SDGs are left-wing policy proposals. They're leftist ideas. They're not universal ideas that everybody agrees on. That's not true. The SDGs include all kinds of leftist concepts. And the United Nations is actively advocating for leftist concepts. And so what it's trying to do in ideologies, what they're trying to do here is embed future technology with left-wing ideology that the United Nations favors and elitist ideologies that the United Nations favors. That's what they're trying to do. And that's what this Global Digital Compact is all about. It's all about creating international systems, protocols, regulatory structures, etc., for ensuring that all future emerging technological changes have embedded within them the ideology of the United Nations. In the book that I have coming out with Glenn Beck, that I co-authored with him, called Dark Future, we dive into so much detail into this topic. So much detail into this topic. It is unbelievable how much people at the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, Great Reset crowd, big banks, even the Federal Reserve, all kinds of institutions, powerful players, the most powerful people in the world have talked about how can we change technology and develop technology, the next wave of it, so that it promotes our left-wing ideology. They talk about it all the time. And what they want to do here in this Our Common Agenda, in this Global Digital Compact, is systematize this and create a structure to ensure that it actually happens, working with public-private partnerships, with government and big tech companies and big corporations and big financial firms and banks and central banks like the European Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, all of them coming together with left-wing academics, left-wing activists, developing the new technology so that it is a certain way. That's what the Global Digital Compact is trying to do. That's what they mean by embedding SDGs into new technology. with universal human rights. They don't mean universal human rights, truly universal human rights. They mean human rights from their perspective. So that would be including a ban on misleading information. Again, that's not my human right. I believe in free speech. So I believe that people should be allowed to say information that I think is misleading. Okay? I want my political and ideological opponents to have the right to speak freely, but my ideological opponents don't want me to have the right to speak freely. And that, I think, tells you a lot. Not all of them, of course. I'm painting with a broad brush, but you get the point. Okay. So there's all sorts of things that we could talk about here. But one of the things that I want to do is talk about the collection of data. So there is no doubt that the future is being, in the future, data is going to be the most important asset that anyone can have. Big institutions need data. Without data, the most powerful machines that they're building today are pointless or nearly pointless. Artificial intelligence without data doesn't do anything. Okay? They need data. Data is so important. And right now, private institutions are the ones collecting most of the data. There are problems with that, especially because many of those private institutions are working hand in hand with government. And that's a big time crisis. But the United Nations solution is, we just need more public collection of data. Because, and by public, they mean government, international institutions, things like that, collecting data, because we can trust them. But we can't trust them. We know that. They abuse their power all the time. So it says here, this is page 7, what we have not yet done is harness data at scale, making them globally accessible and use them to inform national and international development plans and programs, as well as public-private partnerships, e-commerce, technological entrepreneurship, and capital investments. Progress towards achieving 41% of the 92 environmental sustainable development goal indicators, for example, cannot currently be globally measured owing to a lack of interoperable data and standardized reporting. We need more data collection. We need a lot more data collection. That's what this is saying. And it needs to be public. And we need to have access to it. And then we need to use that data along with our powerful machines to make decisions. This is the foundation for a dark future. Okay? It sounds a lot more benign, but than it actually is. When you actually start looking at the details of how they're going to do this, how they're going to make these decisions, you realize they're talking about collectivizing access to all of this data and information about your life so that they know almost everything that's going on. And then they're able to build whole systems around this data collection with smart cities and surveillance systems and all kinds of stuff that really is disturbing. And if you don't believe me, just look up smart cities. Look up World Economic Forum smart cities, United Nations smart cities. Look at what they're doing with data collection there. Look at what's happening in China with their data collection efforts, with their surveillance systems, with their cameras on every corner. This is extremely problematic. I am not a big fan of, and it's complicated, right? I fully acknowledge and accept it's complicated. I'm not saying I want Google to have access to all the data either. We need to figure out a way to keep both government and Google from having all of our data. But that's not what this is saying. That's not what they want at the United Nations. All right, so let's scroll forward a little bit, and let's talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. I know I'm jumping around a little bit from one topic to another. That's just because that's kind of what they do in the report. So it's hard to keep things straight. We're going to come back to some of the crackdowns on free speech and stuff in a little bit. But first, let's talk about governing artificial intelligence for humanity. It says here that it talks about the problems with AI, and I think a lot of that is valid. But it also says, I welcome the growing interest among AI experts on how best to govern the development and use of AI. So it's talking about at an international level, governing these things. We need a global, multidisciplinary conversation in order to examine, assess, and align the application of AI and other emerging technologies. I think that's true. But again, whose values are we embedding into AI? Over 100 sets of ethical AI principles have been developed by different stakeholders, and they share many common ideas, including the need for AI applications to be reliable, transparent, accountable, overseen by humans, and capable of being shut down. That's all true. That needs to happen. Different stakeholders are adapting existing frameworks or developing new ones for risk management and redress. They need to be harmonized and effective across borders. Industry self-regulation is not enough. We need to bring stakeholders together in a meaningful effort to consider the implications of emerging technologies and ensure that they align with universal human rights and values before their widespread application in our societies, economies, militaries, and politics. Again, I actually agree with that. But whose values? When they say universal human rights and values, they don't mean what I mean by universal rights and human values. They don't even mean free speech. They don't even believe in free speech. Not really. So, whose values? We also need to bend the arc of digital investment more towards solving societal problems and shared global challenges. That's right. That's what they believe. They believe we need to, at a UN level and at an internationalism level, bend the arc of digital investment toward certain things that they value. Elites directing the development of technology. That's what this is about. Digital innovations, if consciously applied, can help to overcome obstacles to progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, but only if they rest on a diverse global foundation. I don't believe that the Sustainable Development Goals are the thing that we should be concerned with the development of artificial intelligence. But that's what, there's all kinds of far left-wing ideology built into the Sustainable Development Goals. So when it says we need to bend the arc of investment and we need to create new regulatory schemes and things like that at an international level governing artificial intelligence so that it's embedded with a desire to solve certain societal problems and shared global challenges and deal with and progress forward on the Sustainable Development Goals. I don't want any of that from there, not in the way that they do. And yet that's what this is calling for. That's what this is trying to set up. That's what this digital compact, one of the main things, that's what it's about. So there's so much that could be said on this topic. And I got to be selective in how I address some of these things. But again, I mean, a lot of this it's just really important to understand that the main goal of this thing is to transform the future of technological development and existing technology so that left-wing ideology is built into it. So that when we have AI is making decisions that align with leftist goals. When we have data collection, it's collectively owned and managed or collectively owned and or managed. That we embed all of these ideas into these new technologies on the internet so that people can't, and new technologies and technologies that already exist on the internet, social media companies, etc., so that people can't just say whatever they believe or, practice their religion publicly the way they want to or whatever. There has to be rules. There has to be guardrails, as they said. All right. So, they talk about the framework for all of this. And if you're interested in reading the details of how that works, you can look up this report and check it out. It mentions that there needs to be well, we're getting into the digital trust stuff. Before I move on to that, it says that the member states should commit to establishing a digital human rights advisory mechanism facilitated by the let's see, where is it? Facilitated by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights that would provide practical guidance on human rights and technology issues, building on the framework of the human rights mechanisms and experts, showcase good practices, and convene stakeholders to explore effective and coherent responses to legislative or regulatory issues. That was what I was saying before. So United Nations determining which values should be allowed to be discussed on the internet and how that all works and social media and everything. I mean, and how the technology should be designed. What values does AI have? What values are we putting into, central bank digital currencies and cryptocurrencies and other things? How are we designing these technologies? We're doing it with the goals of the United Nations in mind. That's what's happening here. And again, my goals are in some cases, people who believe in individual liberty share values with the United Nations values, but we don't share values on everything. There's a lot of things we don't agree on. And yet, the United Nations and their allies are the ones who want to develop that framework. People who believe in individual liberty don't have that. We're not even at the table in many cases. Okay. Item E here, digital trust and security. This is on page 15. I propose the following objectives: strengthen cooperation across governments, industry, experts, and civil society to elaborate and implement norms, guidelines, and principles relating to the responsible use of digital technologies. So again, centralized control from elites, top down, on how these technologies can be used. Develop robust accountability criteria and standards for digital platforms and users to address disinformation, hate speech, and other harmful online content. So again, what does this mean? It means you can't say what you really believe on the internet or through these other emerging digital technologies. You can't say what you really believe unless you believe what they believe, in which case you will be allowed to speak. But this is the United Nations openly calling for ending free speech. It'll say that they support free speech, but that's clearly what they're doing here. It says right here, all stakeholders should commit to developing common standards, guidelines, and industry codes to conduct to address harmful content on digital platforms and promote safe civic spaces as follows. Online safety commissioners from different jurisdictions should collaborate to develop shared understandings and best practices and respect freedom of expression and access to information while protecting against harm. So online safety commissioners get to decide what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say. Social media platforms should commit to and put in place co-regulation mechanisms such as social media councils, more truth councils, that would ensure adherence to agreed standards across the industry. The standards underlying the mechanisms could be based on the proposed code of conduct for information integrity on digital platforms and benefit from the discussions at the Internet for Trust, blah, 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 conference organized by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. So again, top-down control of what people can say, what it qualifies as misinformation and disinformation and what doesn't, what qualifies as harmful information, what is true and what isn't true. All of this gets decided by councils, in part developed through the United Nations or something. All of this is part of a massive effort in our common agenda to centralize control, centralize power, and control over what people can say, do, believe, what the values and new technologies would be, etc. Very, very, very disturbing. Very disturbing. There's other stuff in here about artificial intelligence, all kinds of details and things like that. I urge you to take a look at the report when you get a chance. There's also on page 23 of the report a timeline of the Global Digital Compact that shows that in June to August 2023, development of an issues paper based on the co-facilitated consultations related to, this is all building toward the development of a global digital compact that'll be accepted in September 2024. September 2023, the presentation of the issues paper at the ministerial meetings. They're going to have some meetings to discuss this. Late 2023 to the second quarter of 2024, negotiations on the global digital compact. So this is when they're actually going to hammer out the details of it. And by the time we roll into September 2024 at the Summit of the Future, heads of state are already going to know what they're going to do. September 2024, right before the next presidential election here in the United States, we're going to have Joe Biden, who may not be president shortly after that. Who knows? But he may not. He's going to be helping to write the rules, or one of his minions, help write the rules for what you're allowed to say on the internet and what you're not. What is disinformation? What isn't? Who the truth councils should be, and who what they should look like and what their rules should be. Online safety commissioners and all of that. Just absolutely astounding. There's so much more I could talk about on this topic. I could do it all day long. But the good news is that you don't have to listen to me talk all day long. Not about this anyway. There's a great, this book that Glenn Beck and I put together called Dark Future. Again, that comes out in July of 2023. So we're now, when I'm recording this video, about a month away from this coming out. It's going to go into so much of what's going on, and it is so much worse than what I just read to you. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but it is vital that you pay attention to what's going on here. This is just one part of our common agenda, but this is a huge part of it. What you say, what you believe, what counts as truth and not truth. These things are all going to be determined as part of this pact for the future. And it's not going to favor people who believe in individual liberty. I can tell you that. And if the technology of the future, which is incredibly powerful, the technology of the future, like artificial intelligence and other things, is being determined by truth councils set up by the United Nations, well, then we are in big trouble. Big trouble. We have to stay on top of this. All right, I was hoping this video would be short. It was not, and I'm sorry for that, but this is a huge topic, and it's really important that we stay on top of it. All right, until next episode, my name is Justin Haskins. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and share this content if you find it even remotely interesting. It's very helpful to break through those big tech algorithms. I really appreciate your time. And if you have any questions, any comments, any things that you want to get off your chest, leave it in the comments section of this video. I will read the comments. I will not necessarily comment back, but I am reading all the comments. So please feel free to leave comments there. Thank you so much again. Until next time, stay free.